when my mother-in-law bragged, "Your card funded my $76,000 vacation," I just smiled, because that card wasn't even mine. People you care about. My name is Raina Cooper, and for the last 4 years, I've been married to Evan. He's a software engineer, smart, quiet, and the kind of man who always tries to keep the peace. His mother, Lorraine Cooper, on the other hand, is the complete opposite. Loud, proud, and convinced that no woman would ever be good enough for her son. From the moment I joined their family, she made sure I never forgot it. When I first met her, I thought she just needed time to warm up to me. But no matter what I did, help with dinner, bring her gifts, remember her birthday, it was never enough. She would smile sweetly in front of Evan, then pull me aside and whisper things like, "You'll never understand how this family works." Evan would always brush it off. "That's just Mom," he'd say, as if that excused everything. I tried to believe him. I wanted peace. I wanted to fit in. I work from home as an interior designer, managing small projects for local clients. Because Evan is often busy with his job, I handle most of our finances, bills, budgets, credit cards. It's not something I ever minded doing. I'm careful with money, and we lived comfortably. Lorraine, though, had a habit that always made me uneasy. She'd call Evan out of the blue, asking, "Can I borrow your card?" "It's just for a family emergency." Sometimes it was a few $100s for car repairs or medical bills. Evan, being the good son, never said no. I didn't like it, but I didn't want to start another argument. A few months ago, Lorraine mentioned she was going on a much-needed Mediterranean cruise. I remember her saying it like it was a reward she deserved. I didn't ask questions. I assumed she'd saved for it. She posted photos of fancy dinners, champagne glasses, sunsets over the sea. When she got back, she couldn't stop talking about it. One afternoon, she stopped by our house, wearing designer sunglasses and gold jewelry that looked far too expensive. "Oh, Raina," she laughed, setting her handbag on our counter. "Your card funded my $76,000 vacation. You really have expensive taste, don't you?" Evan chuckled awkwardly, but my stomach dropped. I excused myself and walked straight to my desk, where I kept our financial records. I opened our joint account, and there it was, a single charge, $76,243.18. My hands shook. Lorraine had actually done it. She'd taken what wasn't hers, and she was proud of it. I didn't say a word that day. I just closed the laptop, smiled tightly, and watched her sip her wine as if nothing had happened. Inside, though, I promised myself this time I wouldn't let it go. That night, I waited until Evan finished dinner before bringing up the charge. I kept my voice calm, even though my heart was pounding. "Evan," I said, showing him the statement on my laptop, "your mom spent over $76,000. It's right here." He frowned, barely looking at the screen. "Yeah, Mom told me about that. She said she'll pay it back." I stared at him, trying to understand how he could sound so relaxed. "Evan, that's not a small amount." She didn't ask. She just took it. He shrugged. "She probably meant to tell us." "You're overreacting, Raina. She's my mom. She wouldn't steal from us." The words hit harder than I expected. I wanted to argue, but I knew it was pointless. He'd always defend her, no matter what she did. So I just nodded and said quietly, "Okay, if you say so." But inside, I was boiling. A few days later, Lorraine showed up at our door unannounced, dragging a shiny suitcase behind her. She looked like she'd walked straight out of a luxury ad, silk scarf, gold earrings, a diamond bracelet that caught every bit of light in the room. "Well," she said cheerfully, holding up a shopping bag, "I brought souvenirs. You should see the resort we stayed at. 5 stars, darling. Worth every penny." Evan laughed politely, but I couldn't stop staring at her. Every word she spoke felt like another slap. I finally asked, "Lorraine, did you really use our card for your vacation?" Her smile vanished. "Our card," she repeated sharply. "Excuse me, but Evan offered to help. I didn't steal anything." "I saw the charge," I said quietly. "You didn't ask. You just took it." Her face twisted. "You should be grateful, Raina. Not everyone has family who helps out. You act like I owe you something. You're just jealous because I can afford nice things." Evan stepped in immediately. "Raina, that's enough. Don't start this again. Mom said she'll handle it." I looked at him, then back at her. The two of them stood there, united, as if I was the problem. That's when it hit me. They'd both rather make me the villain than admit the truth. I felt the anger settle deep in my chest, heavy but clear. I stopped arguing. I smiled, said nothing more, and excused myself to the study. There, I opened my files and started gathering everything: bank statements, receipts, credit card details. If they wanted to treat me like a fool, I'd let them. For now. But I wasn't done. Not even close. I sat at the kitchen table with the laptop open and my coffee gone cold. I started checking each line of the bank export, one transaction at a time. At first it looked like a mess of hotel names and agency codes I didn't recognize. Then I saw the header for a card account that wasn't in our names the way I expected. It was linked to Lorraine, not to our joint card. I clicked into the details. The $76,000 charge showed under a secondary card issued to an account that had a business name attached. That business account was not something I had ever set up or touched. My stomach dropped. Whoever had used that card had gone through a route I hadn't considered. A separate credit line, cloaked by a company name. I kept going. The deeper I looked, the worse it got. There were other cards and loans tied to that same business profile. Some accounts listed Evan as an authorized user. Others had my name on forms that I had never signed. The signatures looked similar but wrong in tiny ways. Phone numbers I did not know were listed as contact details. Addresses belonged to places I'd never been. I printed everything. I labeled pages and highlighted dates. I felt cold and steady at the same time, like a person watching someone else's crime scene through glass. I knew what this likely meant. Someone had opened credit lines using information that linked to our family. Not by accident. That afternoon I walked into the local branch and asked to speak with fraud. I did not tell them who I was to start. I explained the odd accounts and handed over the documents. The clerk's face changed as she swiveled her screen toward me. She asked a few quiet, precise questions and then said words that made my hands clench. "We will place holds on these accounts and open an investigation. There are multiple suspicious applications." She confirmed that some of the accounts used Evan's social security number and others listed my name as an authorized signer without my authorization. They froze the most risky accounts that same day. The bank said they would contact the credit bureaus and file fraud alerts. I left the building with a thin letter confirming their actions and a calmness that surprised me. I could have stormed home, dragged Lorraine into a fight, or called Evan and demanded answers. Instead, I walked back slowly, carrying the file like a small, dangerous animal. I decided not to speak yet. I could see the path forward if I waited and watched. Let them act as if everything were normal. Let them brag and assume no one noticed. In the quiet between my pulse and the city noise, I began to plan steps that were careful and exact. This would not be a moment of shouting. It would be a sequence of moves, each measured, to make sure the truth could not be denied. I didn't sleep much after the visit to the bank. The numbers and fake accounts kept circling in my head. By morning, I knew I needed someone who understood how deep this could go. I called Nate Barlow, a lawyer I'd gone to college with. We hadn't talked in a while, but when he picked up, his calm voice gave me a little courage. I met him at his small downtown office. It smelled faintly of coffee and paper. I handed him the folder with the statements and notes I'd gathered. He flipped through the pages quietly, his brow tightening with every line. After a few minutes, he looked up and said, "Raina, this isn't a misunderstanding. What your mother-in-law did, using your names, opening accounts, forging information, that's identity theft and fraud. It's serious." Hearing it out loud made my chest tighten, but also made things clear. I asked him what I should do. Nate told me to protect myself first. Don't let them know you're aware yet. Move your money somewhere safe. If they realize you've caught on, they might make things worse. I thanked him and walked straight to the bank again. I opened a new account under my name only, no joint access, no shared contact info. The banker helped me set it up quietly. Over the next few days, I transferred small amounts from our savings. Nothing large enough for Evan or Lorraine to notice right away. I left the joint account open but nearly empty. Enough to keep it looking normal. Each time I moved money, I felt a little steadier. It wasn't about greed, it was about taking back what was mine. Around that same time, Lorraine seemed to grow bolder. She started visiting more often, showing off new clothes and jewelry, dropping hints about planning the next big trip. She'd laugh and say things like, "When you marry well, life really opens up." I'd catch Evan smiling at her jokes, proud of her confidence. At family dinners, she'd talk about her expensive taste and how her son's success made it all possible. She'd glance at me as if daring me to say something. I never did. I'd just smile, nod, and pour her another glass of wine. Inside, I was calm but alert. Every boast, every smirk was another piece of rope she was tying around herself. I didn't need to expose her yet. I just needed to let her believe she'd won. The higher she climbed, the harder she'd fall. When Lorraine started talking about another well-deserved getaway, I knew my chance had come. She bragged at dinner about going to the Caribbean this time, saying she needed a break from all the stress of family drama. Evan nodded along, proud of her again. I stayed quiet, smiling like I always did. A week later, she called me while I was working. "Raina, dear," she said sweetly. "Mind if I use the joint card for a few last-minute things? Just small stuff before the trip." Her tone was casual, like it was nothing. I said, "Sure, go ahead," as if I hadn't been waiting for those exact words. The truth was, there wasn't much money left in that account. I had made sure of it, but I knew Lorraine's habit. She never checked balances. She assumed there would always be more because she thought she could take whatever she wanted. That evening, I called the bank and spoke to the fraud department. I told them I suspected future misuse on my joint account and asked them to monitor transactions closely. "Don't block anything yet," I said, keeping my voice calm. "Just keep an eye on it and notify the proper authorities if anything looks suspicious." The representative understood and made a note. Everything was set. A few days later, the transactions started showing up. I sat at my laptop, watching them appear one after another like dominoes falling. A luxury resort booking in the Bahamas. A first-class airline ticket. A car rental upgrade. Thousands of dollars attempted within hours. Then came the notification I'd been waiting for. Declined. 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 The system had frozen the card after repeated failed charges. A fraud alert went out automatically. I could almost picture her standing at the airport counter, her luggage piled beside her, a long line behind her, and that familiar self-satisfied smile fading fast. She probably tried to charm the clerk, insisting there must be a mistake. But there wasn't. Within the hour, the bank's fraud team called to confirm. "Mrs. Cooper," the man said, "the person using your joint account attempted several large purchases flagged as potential fraud. We've already contacted the authorities." I thanked him politely and hung up. Later, Evan got a call from the airport. His mother had been stopped at check-in, her card confiscated, and her name reported for fraudulent activity. For the first time since this all began, I felt something close to peace. I didn't gloat. I didn't even smile. I just sat there, quiet and steady, knowing the trap had finally closed exactly as planned. Evan's phone started buzzing early that morning. I watched from the kitchen as he answered, his voice full of confusion. "What? Detained? For what?" He grabbed his jacket and keys before I could ask anything. "It's Mom," he said quickly. "Something about a credit card problem at the airport." Then he rushed out the door. I stayed behind, pretending to be puzzled but calm. I made myself coffee and waited. About an hour later, my phone rang. It was Evan. His voice sounded shaky. "They're saying Mom tried to use a card that wasn't hers. They've called the police. They're looking at her accounts." I let a soft gasp escape, just enough to sound believable. "Oh no," I said gently. "I thought that was your card she used. Isn't that what she told you?" The silence on his end said everything. At the airport, officers were already questioning Lorraine. They had pulled up the records and linked the fraudulent cards back to her. The files showed multiple forged authorizations, her handwriting imitating mine and Evan's on several forms. When the officers showed her the paperwork, she tried to laugh it off. Then she panicked. She insisted it was all a misunderstanding. "My son said I could use the cards. My daughter-in-law must have done something to make this look bad." She pointed fingers at everyone but herself. The officers didn't buy it. They had her signatures, transaction histories, and timestamps. Every lie she told only made the truth clearer. When Evan called again later, his voice was quiet, broken. "They said she opened accounts in my name," he said slowly, "and even one with yours. They found forged documents, Raina. She actually signed your name." I kept my tone soft. "I'm sorry, Evan. I know this must be hard to hear." He didn't answer for a long time. I could hear his breath shaking. "I don't understand how she could do this," he said finally. "To us." I didn't remind him how many times I'd warned him. There was no point. The truth had spoken for itself. By evening, the police had escorted Lorraine away for further questioning. The luxury bags she'd flaunted now sat abandoned near the ticket counter. When Evan came home, he looked pale and defeated. I said nothing more, just placed a glass of water in front of him and sat quietly. Inside, I felt calm, not happy, not angry, just certain. Everything was unfolding exactly as I had planned. I tried to tell myself to forgive, to let it go, but when Evan asked me to forgive his mother, claiming she didn't mean harm, I felt a mix of anger and disbelief. How could he ask that of me after everything I had endured? I wanted to explain how his silence and enabling had hurt me for years, but he only seemed to see himself as the victim. He kept pushing, his voice rising with frustration. I told him I couldn't forgive. Not now, not ever, because for years I had carried the weight of his choices. I had waited for him to stand with me, to see me, and instead I had been alone with the consequences. My words didn't soften him. They only made him angrier. Soon the accusations started. He told me I was ruining his family, as if my need for respect and fairness was a crime. I couldn't argue anymore without feeling drained, and the tension between us became unbearable. I knew I had to make a choice for myself. I packed my things quietly, leaving behind just a single note on the kitchen table. I didn't yell, I didn't slam doors. I wrote simply, "You chose her long before I left." Those words carried everything I couldn't say aloud. Leaving felt like stepping into the unknown, but it also felt like finally breathing after holding my breath for years. Once I was out, I began the slow, steady process of rebuilding myself. Filing for divorce was not easy, but it was necessary. It gave me a sense of control I hadn't felt in a long time. I focused on my independence, on making choices that were only about me, not about keeping a fragile peace or trying to fix something that had been broken too long. Each day I felt a little stronger, a little more myself. It wasn't until later that I realized how careful I had been, quietly protecting myself legally while he remained blind to the steps I had taken. By the time he understood, it was too late. I had planned for this not out of spite, but out of necessity. I had learned to prioritize my safety, my peace, and my future. The house he thought he controlled no longer defined me, and the family he thought I had betrayed was already a past I had left behind. Now I move forward with clarity. The anger has softened, replaced with a sense of calm determination. I have chosen myself, and I will continue to choose myself. I am free from the weight of his expectations and his family's interference, and for the first time in a long while, I feel a quiet confidence that this life, built on my terms, is mine to live. Leaving was the hardest decision, but also the most necessary. It was the moment I stopped asking for permission to exist and started living for me. And as I step forward, I know that nothing he says or does can undo the choices I made to protect myself and my future. I never expected to be in a courtroom, but there I was, facing Lorraine and the mess she had created. She was being charged with fraud, identity theft, and using credit without permission. I had spent so much time gathering evidence, organizing every document, every email, every record that showed exactly what she had done. I knew the truth, and I knew it would stand on its own. When it was my turn to speak, I stayed calm. I didn't raise my voice or show anger. I simply told the facts, one by one, presenting each piece of evidence clearly. Months of preparation had made this moment easier, in a way. I could see the disbelief on Lorraine's face as she realized that nothing she could say would change the proof. Every digital signature, every transaction, every message I had kept sealed her fate. Lorraine tried to twist the story, as if she could make me look like the villain. She argued, interrupted, and pointed fingers, but her words fell flat against the evidence I had carefully documented. Even Evan sat quietly, not defending her, just watching as the reality of her actions became impossible to ignore. I could feel the tension in the room as her arrogance began to crumble. The way she carried herself, confident and untouchable for so long, started to break. Finally, it happened. They put her in handcuffs. Evan didn't say a word. He just watched, frozen, as the woman who had caused so much chaos was led away. I didn't feel triumph or gloating. I didn't feel the urge to gloat at her defeat. Instead, I felt a deep, quiet sense of closure. I had faced the situation honestly, followed the law, and protected myself. The court had seen the truth, and justice was being done without me having to shout or fight in anger. Sitting there, I thought about all the months I had spent trying to protect myself and rebuild my life. It hadn't been easy, but everything had led to this moment of clarity. Lorraine's schemes couldn't touch me anymore. Her lies, her manipulations, and even Evan's hesitation had no power here. What mattered was that the law had seen the facts, and the truth could no longer be hidden. As the court emptied, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The legal reckoning wasn't about revenge, It was about setting things right. I had kept my integrity, stayed honest, and let the system work. For the first time in a long while, I felt that I could finally move forward without fear, without worry, and without anyone controlling the path of my life. It wasn't satisfaction I felt. It was something simpler, cleaner, closure. I had stood my ground, and the truth had won. I could finally close this chapter and continue living on my own terms, free from the shadow of Lorraine's actions and the chaos she had tried to drag me into. Months after everything ended, I finally signed the papers that made my divorce official. It felt strange, almost unreal, to close that chapter completely. I left the old life behind and moved to a small coastal town in Oregon. The air was different here, salted with the ocean, fresh and open. And for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe without holding back. I started a small interior design studio, something I had always dreamed of, but never allowed myself to pursue. It wasn't easy at first, but slowly clients came, projects grew, and the work brought me joy. Each room I designed, each space I transformed, felt like a piece of myself I was reclaiming. I was building a life entirely on my own terms, and that independence, that freedom, was something no one could take away. One afternoon, as I was sorting through mail, I found a letter from Lorraine. My heart didn't race. I didn't feel curiosity or dread. I already knew her words wouldn't change anything. She was in jail, writing to beg for forgiveness, as if her asking somehow mattered now. I opened the envelope, read her carefully worded apologies and pleas. Her handwriting was neat, almost pleading, but there was no power in it anymore. I folded the letter with deliberate care and walked to the fireplace. The flames crackled as I tossed it in, watching the paper curl and turn to ash. It felt symbolic, a quiet letting go of the past, a reminder that her control over me had ended long ago. "You wanted my card, Lorraine," I murmured softly, almost to myself. "Now you can keep the debt." I didn't feel anger or triumph. I felt calm, a steady certainty that I had made it through the chaos and come out whole. The past would always be part of me, but it no longer had the power to hurt me. I had my life, my work, and my peace. Looking out at the ocean from my small studio, I realized that this quiet victory, the one without applause or attention, was the one that mattered most. I had built a life where I was in control, where I chose my own path, and where no one else's mistakes could define me. The waves outside moved endlessly, unstoppable, just like I had become. I had finally found freedom, and for the first time in a long while, I smiled without hesitation. A year had passed since I settled into my new life, and I was finally starting to feel the steady rhythm of peace. One afternoon, my phone rang, and it was Nate, my lawyer friend. His voice had that familiar mix of excitement and disbelief. He told me there was leftover restitution money from Lorraine's seized assets. I listened carefully, my mind trying to catch up. The total? $76,000. I paused for a moment, letting the number sink in. Then I laughed softly, a sound full of irony and quiet satisfaction. After everything she had done, after all the chaos and lies, it was almost funny that the money she had taken, the money she had treated like power over me, had somehow come full circle. I didn't feel greedy or vengeful. Instead, I felt inspired. That money wasn't just a sum of numbers. It was a chance to create something meaningful, something that could make a difference for other women who might face struggles like mine. I decided to use it to fund my dream, a women's financial literacy foundation. I named it the Reina Project. I wanted it to be a place where women could learn to take control of their finances, make confident choices, and build independence, just as I had fought to do for myself. Setting up the foundation felt like putting the final pieces in place of a long puzzle. Each step, hiring staff, creating programs, finding mentors, was filled with a sense of purpose I had never felt before. I thought about the women who would benefit, the confidence they would gain, and the doors they could open for themselves. It was more than just money. It was a tool for freedom, for empowerment, and for hope. As I sat in my small office overlooking the ocean, I couldn't help but think back to Lorraine, to all the times she had tried to manipulate and control me. I shook my head and smiled. The irony wasn't lost on me. The very amount she had bragged about, the money she had claimed to enjoy at her leisure, had ended up building something far more valuable than any vacation could ever be. Lorraine bragged that my card funded her $76,000 vacation. Turns out, that same $76,000 built my freedom instead. I leaned back in my chair, looking out at the waves, feeling the weight of the past finally lift. It wasn't just money. It was proof that I had survived, that I had reclaimed my life, and that even the darkest actions could be turned into light. This was my victory, my twist ending, and my chance to make the world a little stronger, one woman at a time.